Welcome. It's July the 31st, 2022. I'm with Pannobhasa in South Carolina. He's been a monk for about 30 years, and he's disrobed, and now he's in South Carolina. And we're going to talk about the Insight Meditation Society. How are you, Pannobhasa?
Oh, fair to middling. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm enjoying summer. It's a heat wave here. So if people are watching this video in the winter time, this is the peak of summer here. Heat wave in Vancouver, about 30 degrees. And how warm is it in South Carolina right now?
Oh, it's mid 90s, like mid 30s.
Yeah. I can do a share screen here of the topic we're going to talk about here. This is from the Northwest Dharma Society. They have a conglomeration of Dharma groups. They seem to be a leftist organization, Northwest Dharma Association. This is a story they have on Portland, the Portland Insight Meditation Center. If people want to stop the screen, they can read this whole article, but I just want to focus in on a little bit of it here. It says here, yeah, right here where my mouse is, it says, additionally, the Portland Meditation Insight Center Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee launched last year, bringing challenging conversations about bias, privilege, and representation to the center of the community. So why don't we start talking about that? Then we can talk about the Vancouver Insight Meditation Society. They write a lot about that.
Yeah, well, Portland, I mean, if they want to be diverse, they got their work cut out for them, because I'm pretty sure that Portland is at least 95% white. So if they want to make it representative, that's probably not good enough, because then the whole board might have only one brown person on the board, which would still be kind of embarrassing.
Maybe they should bring busloads of people from the U.S.-Mexican border, like they brought to Washington, and bring them to Portland. That would be give them some
that
equity.
Would be a good idea. Of course, none of them would be interested in Buddhism, but maybe they can just lock them into a little camp type thing and kind of show them the light of leftist Buddhism.
Yeah, so what did the Buddha say about these identity groups? You know, like how did the Buddha feel about identity groups?
Well, he didn't. I mean, he just completely de-emphasized it. I mean, according to like Theravada Buddhism, or according to the Buddha, you know, in the texts, you know, he's saying that when you join the sangha, it's like all the rivers of the world flowing into the same ocean. It all just becomes the same ocean. And then he was saying that the sangha is like that. And sangha, you know, it's the traditional meaning of sangha, which means ordained monks and nuns. But the sangha is like that, where all the different, you know, races and ethnicities and classes and so forth just flow into the sangha. And it's just like they become the same sangha. They leave behind their class and their, you know, social status and all that. And
so is that diversity? The Buddha included all this diversity and melted it all together as one sangha?
It wasn't seen as diversity, because, you know, it's sort of like he's homogenizing the sangha by just dismissing the whole notion of like identity politics or identitarianism or that sort of thing.
Like he would take untouchables and lower castes and higher castes, and there's no caste system within the sangha, so he's inclusive in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, emphasizing diversity is emphasizing papancha, which is essentially what the delusion that keeps us in samsara. You know, one synonym for nirvana or nibbana is nipapancha, which means no papancha, and papancha means like diversification. You know, like, you know, separating this from that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're really serious about Dhamma, I mean, you should be colorblind, although of course the left now is saying that to be colorblind is a kind of racism or some such, which doesn't make sense, but they don't have to make sense. In fact, it seems like the less sense they make, the more popular it is among like the diehards.
Yeah, they seem to be well funded or supported enough. And I could show you Vancouver here with this share screen. This is the other Northwest Dharma Association link here in Vancouver. It says British Columbia Insight Meditation Society finds fresh and inclusive ways to offer the Dhamma. Oh, they're saying Dhamma instead of Dharma. You see this picture. I know some of these people personally, like Adrienne Ross. I've been over to her house. I met her Jewish husband, and I first met around 1996 when I returned to Vancouver after being a monk in Thailand. So, I mean, I knew her well, and my meditation groups used to have Christmas parties with them, so I knew her well. And her success here is Rachel Lewis seems to be taking over for her. So Rachel Lewis is now moving towards fighting racism within the Sangha. So we can read through bits of this, and you can
All
comment.
right. But I mean, racism within the Sangha, I mean, I've never been exposed to racism within the Sangha.
Well, they mean their lay, when they say Sangha, they mean their own lay community, right?
Yeah, that was, before we get into that, I remember once some German monk, when I was living in a cave in Burma, like 20 years ago, some German monk who was also living in Burma sent me a bunch of old Inquiring Mind magazines. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was this one,
Yeah.
Every issue would have this one little column called Sangha Speaks. And at first I didn't get it because it was never a monk who was speaking. And finally I realized that they've pretty much just commandeered the term Sangha to mean, anybody who comes in and meditates like maybe once a week or something is Sangha. But
it's their sitting community in somebody's living room. That's the definition of Sangha.
Yeah, you don't have to keep even 5 precepts if you don't want to, I suppose, unless they have some kind of rule about it. But I'm not sure what the rules would be. But they've got the same problem. Like Vancouver, BC is not extremely diverse. I assume it's mostly white with maybe a lot of, I remember like back in the 90s.
I think it's about half white now. We have a lot of Chinese. They're bringing.
Yeah. I remember like back in the
Indians.
90s, before Hong Kong went back over to Red China, that there was like an exodus of Hong Kong Chinese people moving to places like Vancouver.
Yeah, a lot of
to get away
Indians.
from the communists.
Yeah, they're bringing Middle Easterns, East Indians. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it says here, British Columbia Insight Meditation Society, BCIMS, is rapidly evolving as it emerges from the pandemic with a new focus on diversity. New models.
Well, scroll up to show the group picture of like the board of directors or whatever.
Oh yeah,
and there's not a whole lot of diversity there now, is there?
No, there's this one fellow here. He looks like he could be Chinese.
Yeah.
Not a lot of diversity there.
Yeah, all you got is like chosen people and Gentiles, like European ones.
Yeah, some tribe members.
So I mean, the problem is that, I mean, in ancient India, like we were talking, anybody could join the Sangha so long as they qualified, and like class and race had nothing to do with whether you qualified. As a general rule, I mean, if you're just completely bizarre looking, I mean, there is, I think it's in the commentary saying if you're too dark or if you're too white, you weren't allowed, just because you'd be unusual and like simple villagers might be afraid of you or something, and it might give the Sangha a bad reputation or some such. But anybody could join as a general rule, so long as they qualified, they met the qualifications for becoming a monk or a nun. But even so, it was mostly the upper classes, because Buddhism is largely an intellectual kind of system. And so it was the intellectual, like the educated people that were more interested. And that was true in ancient India. And it's also true now in the West. And as a general rule, the educated people tend to be Asians and white.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, trying to get like equal representation or representative representation, like, if the population is, 40% brown, trying to have like the board of directors or the sanghas be 40% brown, or the teachers, worse yet, the teachers, then it's just not going to work. Or what you're going to have to do is just, any brown person who shows any interest, you just offer them a teaching job or put them on the board of directors, whether they're qualified or not, because that's the only way you're gonna fill the quota. Or you import them from somewhere else. But there's going to be a high demand on brown Dhamma teachers, other than just the Asian ones, which for some reason are ignored as a general rule by the leftist Western Buddhists.
Oh, are they ignored? They don't want Asian teachers?
Well, they don't even really consider Asian Buddhists to be part of the picture. It's not, it just doesn't fit into the equation. Like they're talking about,
what about
too many
Asians
white people
America?
in the Sangha.
Yeah.
Too many white Buddhists in the West, not enough brown ones, and they're completely ignoring all the Southeast Asian and Sri Lankan people that are also Buddhists. So that really there's probably more Buddhists of color in the West than white Buddhists just because of the Asian immigrant population.
Well, but you see, I think IMS doesn't want to bring in ethnic Buddhists because they practice real Buddhism, so they would clash. They wouldn't go along with the LGBT.
Yeah, it would be
and the
traditional.
global
They
warming.
wouldn't accept a lot of the leftist
The global
ideas.
warming and
Yeah,
yeah.
well, not even just global warming, but just like the way women are treated and that sort of thing also just doesn't really fit the traditional Buddhist
Good
approach.
point. Yeah.
Like in Burma, you might have like all the men sitting on one side and all the women sitting on the other side, and the women go behind the men. You know,
Oh.
like if you're entering the room or leaving the room or whatever, you know, the men go first, which obviously that's not going to fly. And it's really not that big of a deal, but still. I mean, just the differences between Western Buddhism and traditional Asian Buddhism. I mean, it's essentially two different systems at this point.
Yeah, and
I
each
mean,
city
they're both
they're
not
totally
Theravada.
separate. Yeah, they're separate very much.
Yeah, at least the monks, the ordained people, like me, I was ordained in an Asian tradition,
Yeah.
and I think most Western monks were ordained in an Asian tradition. Like the Ajahn Chah tradition is Asian. That's probably half the Western monks. More closely related, like monastic Western Buddhism is more closely related to Asian Buddhism than it is to Western, like secular Buddhism.
Good point. So it's like two different systems. Yeah, I find the Western monks are not leftist in their orientation. In fact, Ajahn Pannobhasa told me you'd be surprised how many of them were quite conservative thinking, even politically quite conservative.
Yeah, except for the missionaries who are trying to not insult or offend or trigger their audiences, which tend to be largely leftist.
Yeah,
No,
like Bhikkhu Bodhi.
it's just
Bhikkhu
the way it
Bodhi's
is in the West, that the conservative religious people tend to just follow Christianity, whereas the leftist, you know, radical types are more interested in more esoteric kind of religious systems, and then they just lately, especially, they just kind of take it over and just completely distort it into something different.
Yeah, like look what they're doing here. I could share a bit more here. What's going on in Vancouver? Said the new focus on diversity, new models for economic equity, and new Dharma teachers. 25-year-old BCIMS has since 2020 been led by a teachers council comprised of co-founder Adrian Ross, who I know personally, plus Rachel Lewis, whom I've met, James Lau and Temple Smith. In addition, other Sangha members have completed the Spirit Rock Community Dharma Teacher Leader Training.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I guess they must be qualified Dharma teachers, right? It's about 4 years training, whatever. And are also leading meditation groups and classes. This is Rachel Lewis, who in 2021 completed the 4-year teacher training program created by the Insight Meditation Society in Massachusetts and Spirit Rock Center in California. She's helped lead the BCIMS shift towards increased mindfulness of racial issues.
Yeah, which is like a shift away from Theravada Buddhism, essentially.
Yeah, but at least
because I mean, racial issues is just not an issue in. I mean, you read the Buddhist texts, and it's just not an issue.
I guess it's worse that it's increased mindfulness of. So they're associating with mindfulness as a good thing to be aware of racial issues.
Yeah, yeah, that is weird. I mean, it's
not good.
It's a very low level of mindfulness. You're still thinking about, you know, politics and so forth.
But pannobhasa,
ultimately, if you're doing mindfulness well, then I mean, you're not even thinking anymore. You're just observing whatever arises, and you can just sit there forever, and you're never going to observe your white privilege.
But she does. Look at the next sentence. She says, for instance, she was part of a team updating an 8-week program for white meditators to help them learn to use practice to understand and confront racism in themselves and their communities.
Yeah, yeah. So it's essentially cultural Marxism masquerading as Buddhism.
Yeah,
it's
and
cultural Marxism
guilt.
with a few like Buddhist gimmicks tossed in, and people are so Western centric, and especially the lefties, they just see everything through a leftist lens, that they just cannot tell the difference between actual Dhamma and just their leftist indoctrination.
Yeah, and
they just think that the
guilt,
Buddha,
right?
if he was enlightened, he had to be just like this politically correct leftist. And to the extent that he's not a politically correct leftist in the text, well, those are just bogus texts.
That's right. I guess the Buddha couldn't have said that.
Yeah.
And she says here, they say here, the sanghas also completed an audit by consulting company Empathy Catalyst, which specializes in helping organizations understand how their offerings are inaccessible for marginalized people. So let's click on Empathy Catalyst. I've never,
Yeah,
so
but
it's
I
a
mean,
consulting company.
marginalized people have really never taken a whole lot of interest in like orthodox Theravada Buddhism. Like I was saying, like in ancient India, you had way more of a less diversity. You almost had apartheid, you know, with the different castes and so forth. It wasn't as strict as it became later, but still, it's, you know, like a chandala or street sweeper. I mean, they were pretty much untouchable then, just as they were in modern times. And I mean, they can join, but they just weren't interested in an intellectual approach to spirituality. They wanted legends and myths and like ceremonies and, you know, bells and whistles and all this kind of stuff. And there's still, most people, they don't go very deep with their religion. They're not interested in the intellectual stuff, especially when you're throwing in all this cultural Marxist stuff and even replacing the genuine Theravada with this cultural Marxist stuff. I mean, they can get that anywhere. You don't have to go to a Buddhist temple to be indoctrinated into being a good leftist.
That's right. You know, I wasn't planning this. I didn't know about the Empathy Catalyst consulting. So look at this. It says specializing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and workplace culture consulting that doesn't shame or actually leaves you feeling empowered. We
So is
provide
that for white
education.
people or non-white people? It doesn't
Well,
shame.
I wonder. It says we provide education, consulting, strategic planning, programming, facilitation, mediation, and coaching. Look at this quote: to build community requires vigilant awareness of the work we must continually do to undermine all the socialization that leads us to behave in ways that perpetuate domination by bell hooks.
Yeah, the domination probably being white supremacist.
Yeah, white
Patriarchs.
supremacists. These are some of their clients. Book a 30-minute free consulting call to see how we can
Ooh.
transform your workplace.
Oh, that would be fun. We control them.
Yeah, maybe we should do that. Look at the bottom here. It says, oh, land acknowledgement. They do this in Canada all the time. This work is global, but is currently based on the unceded, unoccupied, ancestral and traditional lands of the Zigazabuk, Musqueam, Squamish, and Stillawalla nations. These are Native Indian nations. To live, work, play, and learn from these lands are an honor and blessing. So again, it's more white guilt. And it's not actually true that they're unceded. We've had treaties with the Native Indians here.
Yeah, and then the
natives
that we made the treaties with clearly stole the land from whoever was there before them.
Yeah, one tribe fighting another. It's true. So we can book here. Look at this. A free consultation with Alia Ali, it says. Holy smokes.
Nice.
Oh, look at free consultation call at Empathy Catalyst Consulting. Wow. You're not sure which workshop is best for your workplace? Not sure if you'd rather have a facilitated group discussion? Let's talk. Wow. Holy smokes.
Yeah, so then you just call up and say, I'm a white man and I'm like a white nationalist, and see how long the empathy lasts.
Yeah. So that was that. So carrying on, it says here, in addition, the Sangha is rethinking its approach to dana generosity and how best to collect and distribute dana. This is donation money for equitability in a Western context. As a collective, the BC Insight Meditation Society aspires to take further steps towards dismantling structural impediments and unconscious bias in the organization. And we're reviewing how best to offer in-person online retreats that meet the needs of practitioners we serve.
The ironic thing about this is the unconscious bias that they're trying to cure you of. I mean, their entire approach is unconscious bias. They are unconsciously biased in favor of essentially neo-Marxism. And they're oblivious to that, apparently.
Good point, yeah. So,
I mean, it's really just this artificial gobbledygook. You know, you can be mindful of like unconscious racism, which is almost, you know, I mean, it's almost a self-contradiction, but then they're completely oblivious to their own biases. Like they're bias against white people, for example, even though they're mostly white, they're so indoctrinated.
Sure, in a previous email, Rachel Lewis says they want to battle whiteness. I actually use this term. It says
Yeah, well,
here,
they should all drop out, man. Just let brown people move in, and you'll have like a sangha of like 3 brown people that are actually interested, unless they're Asian.
yeah, look at this. Sharon Salzberg graciously offered a talk on this spring as a fundraiser for them. So she's one of the founding members in 1975 of IMS with Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein. And it says here, for instance, in the spring of 2022, we sponsored teacher Anusha Freedom Pool to teach an evening session intended for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. This is the BIPOC individuals. For this event, we set a sliding scale fee, including a free option, with the fee being applied to Anushka's stipend. And we covered about half the cost this way. The remainder came from the new BCIMS Diversity, Equity, Inclusion DEI Fund, which a Sangha established fairly recently. This fall, we may structure another BIPOC event similarly. Isn't that inspiring? What do you think of that?
Well, it's discriminating against white people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, you can't come in. You're the wrong color. And if you say it to white people, it's okay.
Yeah, like it's a discount for people of color, which basically means a surcharge if you're white.
Yeah.
And it says here, as BCIMS grows and attracts people, leaders have been paying more attention to how the organization has created barriers against including young people, BIPOC people, LGBTQI. Q is queer. What's an I? Is that, I don't know, do what an I is?
I have no idea.
I don't know. And gender non-conforming people and other marginalized people seeking to learn and practice dharma. So are these people suffering?
I mean, what are the barriers though? I mean, the barriers is just that you're not like catering to them. You know, it's like, in a way you could say an Asian temple has barriers against like people that aren't of that nationality. You know, you go to a Burmese temple somewhere and they're mostly speaking Burmese. The monks might not even speak much English. You know, they're doing Burmese ceremonies. You know, if the monk gives a talk, he gives it in Burmese. And so, I mean, European people or, you know, white people or any non-Burmese person is welcome to come, but they just feel like an outsider and, you know, they don't fit in. And so they just drift away. But that doesn't mean you should, you know, ban Burmese temples or like sort of, how do you say, just, you know, teach them to be more inclusive of everybody, because they're really not extremely inclusive. They're not trying not to be inclusive. It's just that their approach appeals mostly just to other Burmese people. And it's just going to be that way to some degree, unless you're just, I don't know. It's like you have to remove your backbone in order to just be completely squishy and just try to appeal to anybody that comes along.
Yeah, like I've been to the Burmese temple here and the Thai temple here. I can definitely feel it's for the Thais, it's for the Burmese. And I didn't feel particularly excluded. I mean, this is their culture. I respect that. I'm so happy. You know, we have a Theravada monastery with real monks in the city, but, you know, I understand that they're Thais or they're Burmese. That's fine.
Yeah.
But according to IMS world, they're just not inclusive enough.
Well, I mean, they just ignore them. You know, it's mostly, I mean, you're supposed to be, if you're a good indoctrinated leftist, you're supposed to be against white people.
Yeah. Okay, I could carry on here. It says, in response, BCIMS began offering retreats and days of practice geared to specific affinity groups, and it formed the DEI fund to remove financial barriers to participation. We also added resources, financial, paid and volunteer, to help the organization become safer and more inclusive to all. Maybe these people don't feel safe. Like if you're gay, maybe you don't feel safe, and they'll make you feel safe, I suppose. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like you're rewarded. Like if you're a leftist, you're rewarded for just being traumatized. You know, you get to play the victim card. You know, it's victim culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if people don't call you by the right pronoun or something, you might feel unsafe because you're rewarded for feeling unsafe under that.
So the assumption is, you know, white society out there is constantly making people unsafe because they're all a bunch of white supremacists. So come to the IMS and we'll make you feel safe, you know, because we're not white supremacists, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, good luck trying to get like Black folks and Mexicans and so forth. I mean, bless their heart, I really got nothing against them. But still, I mean, trying to get them interested in Theravada Buddhism that has been just mutated almost beyond recognition into a kind of Buddhism-flavored neo-Marxism. I mean, they might come just for the neo-Marxism stuff, just because, the white people are like flogging themselves in front of the black people to make the black people feel better or something. But still, I mean, history has shown that Theravada Buddhism especially is largely an intellectual system. And just the common, I mean, it works in Burma. You got simple villagers because they're more interested in the stories and the ceremonies.
Yeah.
And the Western Buddhists don't care about stories and ceremonies as a general rule, or they'll just come up with new Western stories that are more applicable to, the Western imagination and so forth.
Well, maybe they can find more like gender non-conforming people. If they can't get blacks, maybe can get some, gays or lesbians or non-binaries to join.
Yeah, they could start a Buddhist she-male movement.
Yeah. It also says here, for a recent Eightfold Path program. Look at this. They're teaching the Eightfold Path. Wasn't that good? We took the opposite approach. We offered under a pure dana model with no requested fees, with an open invitation to participants to support teachers and BCIMS as they're able. So these new models are supplementing our long-established approach of asking for a small registration fee to cover costs and inviting participants to contribute dana directly to their teacher. And I've been to their retreats here since 1998 in Vancouver. I've been to countless retreats. We got like 100 people or 150 people. So they're pulling in good money. So it says, as the programming moved exclusively online with the onset of the pandemic, another avenue open to create accessibility with a shift to online dharma, BCIMS has been attracting a more global audience, augmenting a long-standing effort to remove physical barriers to participation.
Yeah, I've been told that the pandemic pretty much just killed a lot of Dharma centers because people aren't coming back now that you don't have to have the jab and the mask and everything just to show up, just to enter the doorway. And so a lot of them are just going under. They might have only like about a third of the population that they had before the pandemic started.
Yeah, and I guess people can get some other teachers in other cities that are really good teachers that they have an affinity for on Zoom. So you don't have to go local, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my point of view, like as like a Western Buddhist who really doesn't have any use for the cultural Marxism stuff, is just really interested just in, applying, Orthodox Buddhism as much as possible, that you pretty much have to rely on an internet community because there's just not very many of us. We're very thinly scattered across the world. And so, it's like the Discord server that's associated with my Subscribestar page. It's people from all around the world, really, like not just America and Canada, but also like Australia and New Zealand and Europe and the UK and so forth.
Yeah. And here they describe a deep history of commitment. This dedication to the Theravada tradition in British Columbia started 25 years ago. And I was there at the founding 25 years ago, and it actually was more Theravadan then, before this leftist stuff came into it. It says when in the late 1990s, two newly authorized Vancouver teachers, Adrian Ross and Joanne Broach. I met Joanne Broach first in 1996. We were friends. I've been over to her house, and she invited me to give my first talk in the city to her Dharma group, and then I was trying to kind of ingratiate myself into the Insight Meditation Society, becoming one of their teachers. And then one of my Burmese friends here, Myat Chatun, he's a local Burmese teacher, said, Brian, all of these teachers at IMS in Vancouver, they're all lesbians. So then I realized, that's why they wouldn't want me as one of their teachers. I was a straight male. And this is
you can call yourself a lesbian.
That would have helped. And it wasn't until like another 10 years after that I realized, that the IMS is so Marxist and leftist. I mean, I didn't know anything about that in 1996, 1997. I just didn't know about this stuff. It wasn't until years later I discovered.
Yeah, when I came back to America in 2011, I mean, you could see that, I mean, the difference between Western Theravada and Burmese Theravada was like the difference between night and day. I mean, it was very, very different. And it was a lot of, I mean, it wasn't really that bad yet. I mean, the left hadn't gone completely off the deep end yet in 2011. But still, I just thought that this kind of leftist approach, it was just sort of a Buddhist thing, it was lefties are more attracted to Buddhism. I didn't realize until around 2015, like when Trump started running for president, that it was just endemic throughout the whole West, all this neo-Marxism stuff. But my advice anyway,
Yeah.
in British Columbia, you want genuine Theravada. You want to go to a genuine Theravada Buddhist place. Go to Birkin. Don't
Yeah.
bother with these lay groups because they're all it's pride flags and global warming more than it is actual dharma.
Yeah, the website is birkin.ca, Birkin Forest Monastery outside the city of Vancouver. It's about a 4-hour drive. Yeah.
It's up around like Kamloops or something.
Yeah, near Kamloops. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I could finish a bit more on this bit here. So, I knew Adrian Ross and Joanne Broach. They began traveling to various centers in the community. They were spirits of Spirit Rock's teacher program, then mentored by Jack Cornfield. So he was their direct teacher. Often Ross and Broach would invite well-known teachers from the United States and England to teach with them, including British Columbians to senior Dharma teachers whom they otherwise would not have met. And I've been to a lot of retreats. They bring them all over the United States and Hawaii to teach weekend retreats here. So, and Adrian Ross, she's still the dominant teacher here. Joanne Broach, she died in 2017. I knew her. So it says, Roch and Broach sowed seeds for the flourishing of the Dharma throughout British Columbia. In addition to leading retreats, they trained local community members to begin their own local sitting groups. So they were growing. So they became the biggest scene. This is all over America too, right? IMS. And then as those groups grew organically, members felt a need to communicate and share information with each other. So with the help from volunteer Sangha members, the two teachers created BCIMS with several objectives: to publish a monthly newsletter, to host a central website to share information on distributed programs, organized residential retreats. Joanne, she passed away in 2017. So BCIMS has never had a physical site of its own. So just carry on. They met at different places here and talked about interconnectedness, carrying on. So I guess that's, at the end, we have to comment on this. It says here, I'll just read this. It says, as consciously and wisely as we can, we continue to move forward in these endeavors. Always we're firmly rooted in our commitment to the Buddha, guided by the Dhamma and supported by our beloved Sangha. So they're saying, do you think they're really committed to the Buddha? What do you think?
Yeah, so long as it fits in with, identity politics and, just the standard leftist approach, which, I mean, it's these groups more closely resemble like Western Unitarians than they do Asian Buddhists. It's the same, pretty much the same kind of sermons to the extent that they deviate from what the scriptures say. They're deviating in the same direction with regard to all the lefty, the talking points.
I like the talk you recently gave with us saying that Theravada Buddhism is not politically correct. So they cannot be representing the Buddha if they're being politically correct. There's a direct contradiction there.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of things in Orthodox, just basic, Buddhism 101 that are not politically correct. Like all suffering is ultimately self-inflicted. Whenever you're unhappy, it's your own fault. And that's just like the exact opposite of the left, which says if you're unhappy, you blame white people.
Yeah, you got to blame the enemy. So this is
blame somebody else.
So this is seriously misleading. They're saying we're always firmly rooted in our commitment to the Buddha. Not true. Guided by the Dhamma. Not true. And supported by our beloved Sangha. So how many Buddhist monks say yes, we support this and we're with you?
They've redefined the word Sangha, and that's the left is really good at redefining. They might have redefined Buddha and Dhamma too, for all we know. So that it means something different from what we mean when we say it.
And have this obligatory statement, either at the end or the beginning. It says, all this work takes place on the beautiful traditional, the unceded lands of the Squamish, Musqueam, and the Selawa peoples. All of them have stewarded this land for thousands of years and so continue until Whitey ruined everything. And then at the very end, it says about the author, Laura Quitsealy. She says, Laura's been practicing meditation in Theravada tradition since 2000, when she attended her first retreat in Vancouver with Howie Cohn. I've met him. She lives on Bowen Island, the unceded something or other lands. She currently serves on the board of directors of BCIMS and is participating Spirit Rock's 7th dedicated practitioners program.
How does 7 become a letter?
Yeah, the way they spell, and also the spelling
Squamish.
is so
To
confusing.
spell Squamish correctly, you have to include the letter 7.
Yeah. Look how they spell Bowen Island, next to Wisdom.
Yeah.
That's probably
I don't
another
know.
screwing with people's minds, right?
Yeah,
so
well,
there
I
you
mean,
go.
like I already said, it's like the Squamish people, in all likelihood, were not the first people here. I mean, they took it away from whoever was there before them.
What
And
about the
then
Soul
the
Train
people,
theory?
those people took it away from whoever was before them. It was
And there
just
might have been
waves
white
and
people,
waves of
right?
migration.
There could
What's
have been
that?
white people here. There could have been white people here 20,000 years ago. They found white skeletons in Washington State, and they tried to cover that up. And
Well, I
the
think all
white people might have
skeletons
been
are
killed
white.
off.
I think all skeletons are white. So there you go.
So that's current state of, so we started with the Portland IMS and Vancouver Insight Meditation side, but it's pretty much the same all over America.
Yeah, I mean,
and
you could
Canada.
just pick 2 at random of these IMS affiliated groups, and it'd be pretty much all the same.
Yeah. I guess I picked these because I've known these people personally over the last 25 years. I met with them, I hung out with them, and I wasn't awake back in the 1990s and early 2000s.
Yeah, they're not bad people. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're like evil or anything.
No.
And it's just human nature that you're going to distort a new system to fit your own culture. Like, for example, I was approached by quite a few, like, really right wing type of Buddhists, like Western Buddhists that are just, like full blown fascists, a few of them. And they wanted to start a website, and I participated in it. I was sort of like a technical advisor with regard to what is and is not genuine Buddhism. But then they just started deviating more and more into like militarism, like Buddhist militarism, and taking like a fascist samurai kind of approach to Buddhism. And it really wasn't what the Buddha taught. So I mean, this kind of stuff happens like, all on both sides of the spectrum. It's just, pretty much everybody will do it to some degree.
Yeah. One experience I did have, around 2010, I met Rachel Lewis. She was new to the organization. We were in East Van somewhere, and I was introduced to her. So I said hi, and I tapped her on the shoulder like this, Then later, days later, I got a call from Adrienne Ross. She's a head teacher, and she explained that Rachel Lewis doesn't like to be touched. I said, what? She said, oh, well, I'm not saying that you touched her sexually. So then it became this big conversation about me touching Rachel Lewis. And then she said, and she explained why I'm British, Brian. I mean, I don't like when people hug me because I'm British. I don't like to touch, So, I mean, they're making a point that I'm this straight white male and I'm a problem. So they made an issue of a problem of just a totally minor incidental.
Well, I mean, if you're a serious Buddhist, especially if you're a teacher, then if you don't like something, then you're mindful of the aversion or irritation that arises, and you don't react. And then you cure yourself of it, and you don't just wallow in it and try to insist that everybody caters to your foibles. I mean, you cure yourself of the foibles through practicing Buddhist mindfulness. And she apparently is a teacher of it, and they're still clueless. And it's not just the Westerners. I've met some Asian meditation masters, for example. I mean, world famous ones who, nevertheless, I mean, they're just like angry people, or they definitely have favorites and people that they just hate on sight. And it's just being human, I suppose. But still, a teacher has to live up to a higher standard than the average messed up human.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we all learn at the school of example and at no weather.
Yeah.
So anything else on IMS? It was fun having this conversation with you, pannobhasa.
Yeah, it's always fun to rant about leftist so-called Buddhists.
Yeah.
But I mean, in conclusion, I would just advise anybody who really wants to understand Buddhism to avoid these kind of places like the plague, and like read ancient texts, read the texts, or try to find some place that's affiliated with actual ordained monks, so that you're going to get something knowledgeable and more or less legitimate and genuine, instead of this identity politics crap masquerading as Buddhism. It's essentially neo-Marxism, or whatever you want to call it, identity politics, whatever, with a little bit of Buddhist flavoring added. It's like like orange Kool-Aid being passed off as orange juice.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I would also add, if it's practical for people, just go online, type in the word Ajahn and look for any Western monk, you know, like there's my tradition or there's other monks. Just look for Western Theravada monks. They probably have 10 years seniority, so they know what they're talking about if they're teaching. There's lots of really good Dharma just on YouTube. So a lot of great teachers, like there's pannobhasa as well, Ajahn put a demo, you know. So there's lots of great teachings online, and they can avoid the Insight Meditation Society.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to learn genuine Buddhism, find someone who has like lived the life, conscientiously and sincerely, an ordained monastic. And I mean, it's not necessarily bad to go and listen to Hebrew lesbians giving talks, but as a general rule, you're going to get something closer to the genuine article from someone who is like literally has lived the life of like the highest teachings in the ancient Buddhist texts.
Right on. Well, thank you kindly, pannobhasa. Glad you could join me today.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and also Happy Cat. I remember you called her. She's a communist because she says Mao. She just like to say black cats matter. Black cats matter. She puts her communist fists up in the air.
Yeah.
Actually, she told me her 5-year plan where she sees herself 5 years from now.
Yeah,
she wants to have 1 million hits. Well, she wants to have 1 million hits because she's already like the most popular cat on her block, but she wants to be the most popular cat in the whole city. So
yeah,
that's Happy Cat's
Kitty's
goals.
great pounce forwards.
Okay, thanks for joining me. See you next time.
Yeah.